Great. All right. I think we are good to go, ready to start this lecture or forum on the future of tourism and especially the sustainable direction everybody wants the tourism to take after this COVID-19 pandemic has passed. And I figured out this would be a perfect starting point, starting picture for my presentation, how the coronavirus has conquered the whole planet, and it's a great indication of how it has impacted the tourism field, and tourism and hospitality fields are definitely one of the industries and fields that are that are having the biggest impact by this coronavirus, and we are going to discuss these things today. So just a few words about myself. I'm the head of e-tourism research at the University of Eastern Finland Business School. On my education, I have a PhD in marketing, and I focus on information and communication technologies in market segmentation in tourism. I'm also a director for our international master's degree program in tourism marketing and management. So we are soon going to start our application period for the September 2021 intake. And if you're interested in studying the topic more at the master's level, you can check out the website at the uaf.fi/tmm. As the head of e-tourism research and the director of the program, I do quite a lot of teaching regarding the digital technologies, but also on a general side about the phenomenon of tourism from the social science perspective. So lately I've positioned myself a little bit more into the social sciences and trying to understand the phenomenon of tourism as part of our society, and especially during these COVID-19 times, we are witnessing the importance of understanding not just how businesses work, but also how societies work. I do quite a lot of keynotes, consultancies, and stuff like that in addition to all of this, and work as an associate editor for the Journal of Information Technology in Tourism. And if you want to contact me, you can do it by Twitter or LinkedIn or any other social media channel. I'm quite active in all of those. But based on this, and I've been paying quite a lot of attention to COVID-19, and I think that's taken for granted in the tourism industry nowadays, that no one can close their eyes about the impacts that this virus is having on our industry and also on our society. So we have one goal for today. We are going to investigate whether or not tourism can be a sustainable industry in post-COVID-19 world, and what it means and what it requires. And we are going to go through some of the major discourses that the tourism literature and the tourism industry is having regarding this, the impacts of COVID-19 on the whole field. I've structured this presentation into 3 parts. So first, we are going to discuss and just get a brief overview of what sustainable tourism means and what we are meaning when we are talking about sustainable tourism. Is there even a term such as sustainable tourism, or is it an oxymoron? Can those 2 words ever be combined together? And this is a big question for the whole industry and a big issue. Then we're going to have a brief overview of the impacts of COVID-19 on tourism. How is that impacted? What has it changed? And then in the final part, we put all of this together and try to understand that will tourism change, how and why, and what it requires for us if we want to make the recovery, as we say, something that makes tourism a bit more sustainable industry, a bit more sustainable field. So through these 3 topics, we are going to have, after this presentation, quite a good understanding of this current situation, and also some kind of a outlook into the future, and what does the future hold for sustainable tourism development. And I think I'm gonna give this presentation first, and if you have any questions during the presentation, you can just write them to the chat, for example, and then afterwards, after my presentation is over, we can discuss the issues and topics that you guys have raised in the chat, and exchange ideas and thoughts about this whole thing. And it's great to have a live audience also, so thank you all for joining the session, and hopefully you'll find it interesting. But let's start. So I think if you've been in the tourism field, there's no running away from sustainable tourism. It is one of the most common terms used in the field, and the interest towards sustainable tourism has grown quite a lot. And typically, one of the main ideas between sustainable tourism is the triple bottom line approach. So we have economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social or cultural sustainability. And through this approach, we can identify the impacts of the tourism industry and what tourism causes. So tourism has both positive as well as negative sides that we are going to discuss in this first part of the presentation. Understanding these 3 things means that we are always trying to find some kind of balance between all of these, and typically it's been that they are on the different sides of the scale. So at some point, if you are going to increase the economic sustainability of the industry, you have to sacrifice the environmental or even social or cultural sustainability of the industry. And now the whole industry is trying to balance that. What is the right amount of harm to the environment compared to the economic benefits that the tourism causes? And tourism as a general in the field in 2019, 2018, before the coronavirus hit the industry, it was one of the biggest industries in the world. It was responsible for about 10% of the gross domestic product. It was responsible for 10% of the global employment. So it's a huge industry and hugely important for many countries. If we think of, for example, Greece or Spain or limited areas such as Canary Islands here in Europe, tourism has become one of the central building blocks of their economy. And without tourism, now that we have moved into the no tourism time period, now we are starting to really understand the global scale of the tourism industry. Personally, when I'm speaking about sustainable tourism, because I come from the marketing and business background, I always have this idea that in order for business to be sustainable, it needs to be economically sustainable. So a business that cannot make profit, that cannot survive financially, cannot be a sustainable business. But if you have a business that is making a revenue, it can contribute beneficially for the environmental and social well-being. And that is increasingly the responsibility of every business. So if we look at business literature, for example, how it is transitioning from understanding of how to make money the best way or the most, how to increase the revenues the most, we are also starting to pay a lot more attention to all the negative sides of what doing business causes. And this is a topic that we will be discussing in this presentation quite a lot, that we need this kind of a change in the way how we regard business and how we regard tourism, but more on that later on. Well, this is the triple bottom line approach: economic, environmental, social, cultural, sustainability. So we want the planet to be sustainable, so that we should be leaving the planet in better shape for our children than what we got it. That's how I personally understand sustainable development. And at this moment, if we look at virtually any indicator at all, it's not going so well. So something has to change, and role of tourism is quite big in this global picture. UNWTO, so United Nations World Tourism Organization, is looking at the 17 sustainable development goals that are launched by the United Nations, and it's looking at how tourism can contribute to all these 17 goals. And tourism has quite a great impact, both negative as well as positive, in almost all of these 17 sustainable development goals. So if we think, for example, poverty, how tourism is a major source of income, especially foreign income, for many communities in many countries. It enables them to get jobs and provide income for many, which then prevents, of course, hunger and enables new kind of health and well-being options for many. Tourism is requiring or contributing also to developing quality education and for example, clean water and sanitation in many places where it wouldn't exist without the needs of the tourism industry. So tourism industry and its service levels need quite a lot of infrastructure and need quite a lot from the destination in order to cater for the tourists. And typically when we cater for the tourists, it should also be something that impacts positively the local community. But then, of course, we have also the big problems of today, meaning the climate change and especially how species are becoming extinct, becoming endangered, and how tourism as an industry is turning forests and other natural sites into tourism attractions, which is then affecting the flora and fauna in many ways. So this framework allows us to go deeper into the impacts of tourism, both positive and negative, and examine the tourism as a phenomenon from many different sides and understand its role in communities and in the global economy. Well, to come back into the triple bottom line, I find it in a way useful approach to understanding what is sustainable tourism, because it allows us to examine what we can do differently. What are the things that we can pay attention to when we are trying to develop tourism in a more sustainable way? And we did with our students a couple of years ago an assignment where we created this kind of posters that allowed us to understand what are the environmental, social, and economical actions that each one of us can take, and provide a little bit background into this topic. So if we look at, for example, environmentally friendliness, how can we be more environmentally friendly when we are considering tourism industry, and especially considering the recovery of the tourism industry from all of this? Before the COVID-19 hit, it was estimated that tourism contributes around 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions, with transportation accounting most of it. So flying especially has been one of the biggest environmental issues in the tourism industry because of its greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the issues with flying is that many other industries, global industries in the world, have been able to limit the growth of their CO2 emissions and global greenhouse gas emissions. But flying is one of the industries that is having difficulties doing so. So as tourism, especially before COVID-19, was seen as an industry that was going to grow heavily in a very fast pace until 2050 at least. But nonetheless, we can make quite a lot of choices as consumers to make sure that the industry develops in a sustainable way, and businesses also. So businesses and tourism destinations can prefer slow travel packages, trips. Then, for example, water conservation is a big thing, both for businesses as well as tourists ourselves. How we use energy, how we adopt sustainable ways of renewable energy, recycling, reducing just the amount of waste we create. For example, food waste is a huge issue in the tourism field that we are quite interested in research-wise in our department. And if you think of all the breakfast buffets, for example, in hotels, that how much food is going to waste because of those. So avoiding it is a big global issue, and we are studying new ways all the time to do that, just that. So we have plenty of ways to be environmentally friendly, plenty of ways to develop tourism in an environmentally friendly way. Design it so that it doesn't damage or destruct ecosystems and habitats, and consume the destination where tourism happens. This is one of the biggest issues in tourism, in addition to global greenhouse gases, that tourism has huge impacts on the destination where tourism happens, and not that much impact on the home environment of the tourists. So the tourists are actually lending or renting the space where tourism happens, and as such might not have such a keen interest in preserving that environment because it is not their own home environment. And this is one of the issues that tourism academics are paying quite a lot of attention to at this moment. Then, besides environmentally friendliness, we can also travel and develop tourism businesses in a culturally and socially sustainable way. Tourism has positive impacts as well as negative impacts on cultural sustainability. For example, we are talking about the globalization and how the tourism industry and the way people travel and what they expect from their travels is making the whole world actually culturally really similar to each other. If you go to virtually any big city in the world, the city center looks almost exactly the same in every big city. So it has the same stores, it has the same cafes, it has the same restaurants, no matter where you go. So the cultural identity part is definitely weakened by tourism. We also have for example, loss of indigenous languages that has happened because of tourism, and how the indigenous population territory has been conquered for tourism purposes. But then on the other hand, tourism also has the possibility to preserve these things. For example, providing or motivating people to preserve indigenous languages if they are important for the cultural or the tourism settings in the destination. The importance of belonging into a community is definitely a positive side, as well as this big issue of creating understanding and increasing knowledge, so that we understand how people in different parts of the world live and understand different cultures, opinions, people, and so on. It's a fantastic thing in tourism. There's quite a lot we can do as tourists to be socially and culturally sustainable. just I think being open-minded and interested and interested in learning new things. So not just about these hedonistic tourism types that you go on a beach for 2 weeks and don't meet any locals there and just eat in the global food chains or restaurant chains and so on. So there's a lot of different options, a lot of different choices we can make in order to become more for our tourism actions to become more beneficial for the destination communities as well as for ourselves. And then, of course, this whole economic responsibility and how do we make economic choices. Before the COVID-19, over-tourism was one of the biggest issues in tourism and one of the biggest attention points in the tourism literature that we are seeing. Beaches, cities, nature parks, many destinations just so full of people that it becomes intolerable for local people to live there anymore. And one of the eye-raising statistics that we found out that for every $100 spent by a tourist on a holiday to a developing country, only 5% remains in the host community. So one of our responsibilities is to make choices so that that the tourism actually benefits the local people. This is because we are renting out their destination, we are renting out their space, we are renting out their resources. So it would be great that we are paying them for our tourism, for our trips and choices made during the trip. But if we just use big international chains and avoid all that is local, small and medium-sized enterprises, for example, we can have trips where the local community doesn't benefit from the trip almost at all, which is always sad. So this is one of the things that we can pay attention to, and one of the things that we are really enthusiastic about in our program. There's small and medium-sized enterprises that create fantastic tourism experiences and contribute directly into the well-being of the local communities. So to sum up, there's both positive and negative effects of tourism, and this makes tourism, we are often talking about a wicked problem, meaning that it is a problem that doesn't have easy solutions. So on the other hand, we have overcrowding, well, not at this moment, but well in some destinations still, but nonetheless, we had overcrowding, we had pollution, carbon footprint, erosion, food waste, and all different kinds of waste that is created because of tourism, as well as other economic and social cultural negative sides of tourism that you can probably see and read here. But then on the other hand, tourism is a fantastic industry. It creates well-being for the local communities, for the tourists. It educates us. It gives us eye-opening experiences. We can even be transformed by tourism to behave more environmentally and sustainable way when we get back home. It allows us to connect people and cultures from all over the world. It's difficult to think about the world, that how small place it would be without the current form of tourism. So tourism really opens up our eyes and gives us great possibilities to understand each other if we just are interested in these things. It allows preservation of species. For example, in Africa, there's excellent cases where endangered species have been saved by the local community because these species are so important for the tourism industry. I'm not talking just about hunting tourism, which is one one form of tourism, but also all these tours and activities that these wild animals play an important role in. And when the local community is dependent on these animals, it has great motivation to preserve them and help them to thrive. So there's all these kind of fantastic things about tourism. So if we think of tourism at this moment, when there's no tourism, is tourism now sustainable? Not so much. If we are talking about the transition into the green economy, into the carbon neutral world, we are also talking about how to make it just and fair for everybody. And now a lot of communities, many communities are suffering because there is no tourism, and it's creating big issues. For example, in Lapland, we have a big discussion about what happens to all these sled dogs. There's something like 10,000 sled dogs just in Finnish Lapland, and when there's no tourists and the dogs take thousands of euros per month just to what they need to eat, it creates a difficult equation for many companies, and it's the same case in many different parts of the world. So basically this is the brief introduction into sustainable tourism and how it is about finding the right balance between all of these issues. Of course, we have to do everything we can to minimize the negative impacts of tourism, and for that, every business, every destination, every tourist has to be aware of these issues and actively work towards reducing these negative effects. But then on the other hand, we also have to make sure that we utilize the possibilities all these positive effects create. The best thing would be that instead of having this scale where we balance the positive and negative effects, we would be able to put every good thing on the same side, so that tourism as a phenomenon would contribute to all of these things. It would contribute to environmental, economic, and social-cultural sustainability as it happens. And for this, we are talking, for example, regenerative tourism that we will be talking about later on in the presentation. All right. Well, up until 2019, tourism industry was one of the biggest industries in the world, and then this coronavirus hit the industry quite a lot and virtually closed it down globally, which is completely unprecedented event in the tourism industry. Tourism industry has generally been extremely resilient in all these different kind of catastrophes. It has traditionally bounced back very fast after any kind of event. But this is not your ordinary event. This is something that we've never ever experienced before. And before I go into this, I also had to remind that tourism is one of the reasons why the things got so bad with the COVID-19. Tourism was the method and the reason why this virus managed to spread around the world so fast. So the tourism industry has its responsibility in these issues. It is also a reason why we are in this state. And for example, we can ask the questions that what if the airlines would have taken the losses and canceled all the flights to the destinations where the virus was first spotted as a precaution? What would have happened? Would things be any different? But it's no use to think about the past. It's better to think about the future and what we can learn from all of this. Temple University is keeping this type of global COVID-19 tourism index, which basically gives an overview of various different indicators regarding mobility, arrivals, accommodation nights. It collects many statistics into one place. And this is a little bit badly presented, but in any case, this is the graph starts from I think January 2020, and before the virus really spread globally, the travel tourism index was about 95. Then in the worst moments, when virtually the whole global shutdown came, it dropped only to 15. So it was a huge drop. If we think of these as percentages, we can see it's kind of like as indexes work, that it was only a small fraction of what it used to be. And now, with almost more than half a year into this new world, we are still barely hanging there at 30% capacity compared to what it used to be. So we are nowhere near the normal state at this point, and unlikely that it will be the case in the future. We can look at there's some countries that are doing quite well. For example, China, New Zealand, Australia, Greece, that are operating in 50% capacity around depending of course on different tourism types, which means that even for them the impact has been quite great. This is a nice picture of international scheduled flights, how they changed year over year. If we compare January, February, March, April, and this year to 2019, that we are seeing almost 100% drops in global flights, and as the sentiment, the index also showed, it's gotten a little bit better. I think there should be countries in the left part. You can check it from the OAG.com, the latest statistics. But in any case, the situation is nowhere near, and this is a good statistic that shows that. Well, in Finland, this is from our statistics Finland, and how overnight stays in September were compared to last year, and we can see, for example, China, Japan, Russia, we are seeing 98, 97, 96% drops in overnight stay. So virtually the whole foreign tourism is collapsing, and it's also the case in many other countries. We have many countries dependent on tourism, like Spain and Greece and also Italy, that are seeing similar numbers. And this kind of lack of international tourists is affecting the industry quite a lot. Many actors are now looking at domestic markets in Finland and in many other countries. Finland is in a really good position in a way that Finnish tourists have always spent more money abroad than what international tourists have spent in Finland. So basically, if all the money that the Finnish tourists have spent abroad would be spent on domestic tourism, the domestic tourism in Finland, the Finnish tourism industry would break all the records. But unfortunately, we are also seeing quite a big slump also from domestic tourists. People are afraid to move and staying at home and saving for the future. And hopefully that future comes soon, and we can again travel safely. We have some really good indications that it might happen already next year. The money that we are talking is just astronomical. If we look at the world's leading airlines, they have lost more than $100 billion in revenue just this year. And the global impacts, I remember when the virus started spreading and I was following this news, and different estimates came that the tourism industry will lose at least 100 billion. It will lose at least 300 billion. It just got worse and worse, 500 billion, 700 billion. And now it's 1.2 trillion at this moment, and we still don't actually know when the recovery will happen. So, and another important thing here is that it's estimated that for every 1 million lost in international tourism revenue, a country's national income could drop by up to 3 million. So tourism has a lot of these kind of positive effects beyond just direct tourism income, and this means that whatever happens in the tourism industry has quite a big impact on the whole country's economy, and especially on employment. Tourism is heavily dependent on workers, and workforce is one of the biggest employers globally. And if we don't get tourism rolling again and growing again, recovering, those jobs will be lost, and it will be a grave consequence for many countries. And this is another nice chart that depicts world's passenger traffic, especially how people have been flying, and it dates all the way back to the Second World War. So you can see different crises here. We have the oil crisis, and Asian crisis, and 9/11 terrorist attacks, SARS, and financial crisis, and all of these have basically just flattened the growth for a little bit. But with coronavirus, we are going way down. We are going back into the numbers that were in 10 years ago, 20 years ago. The global tourism index can drop 20, 30 years regarding the numbers of trips. But then the other aspect of this picture is that this stops at 2020. And imagine what if the coronavirus wouldn't have came, and you project this growth rate to 2050. If the curve would be similar, growing rapidly, you can just imagine the impact that the tourism industry has on for example, the environmental impact, the overcrowding, all of these issues that would have happened with that kind of tourism growth, if tourism would have continued to grow in its path that we can see on this line. If Venice is already overcrowded, if many other cities and destinations are overcrowded, and we are projecting that international travel will almost double by 2050, you can guess the impact. It's huge. So now this COVID-19 pandemic is giving us an option to stop and think about tourism as a phenomenon a little bit more. We have been a heavily growth-oriented industry, and growth has been one of the driving forces of tourism for quite a long time. And now we need to start questioning this. Now we have to think of new ways new ways tourism can develop and prosper and be beneficial in the future. So let's take a look at some of the developments for the future of tourism, what we are seeing here, and what kind of things need to change for a more sustainable future for tourism. So we wrote with other editors of the Information Technology and Tourism Journal a Viewpoint article a while back, where we examined the current paradigm of the tourism industry and how we are now heavily rooted in the growth paradigm that we are looking at why COVID-19 has been such a terrible event is because it stopped our growth, and we are losing growth. We are losing markets, we are losing money, and that's why it's horrible. But on the other hand, at the same time, we are losing a lot of people are dying, a lot of people are gravely ill and sick because of this disease, and how we treat the world and how we perceive this scientific growth technology paradigm, it's actually one of the causes for all of this. So many economists think that it's a purely natural event that has originated outside of the economic system. But if we are conquering more and more space from nature and being in close contact with the nature more and more, it also means that all of these things are much more likely to happen. And it's unlikely that this is the last time we will be seeing this kind of a virus. And it's not even the first time. We had already SARS and other viruses that were threatening, but were able to deal with in time without them really having such a big impact on the industry. Of course, we are also heavily focused on technology, especially in sustainable tourism, that technology can solve everything. We don't have to change anything because technology will solve it. We can just wait for the scientists to create a vaccine, and then everything will be fine. We can use the technology to alleviate the impacts of the coronavirus on the industry. We can automate everything. We can track people and all of these things. But all of this has also larger societal consequences. So science is thought about as something that just helps us to get back into these economic growth trajectories and keep us doing things as we have been doing things. And so far, what the whole industry is speaking about at this moment is just how do we recover? How do we get back to the normal? In the industry, there's almost no discussion at all that will there be some kind of new normal. Everybody just wants the old normal to get back. But in academia, among the scientists and researchers within the tourism field, there's been a lot of calls for a different path, a more sustainable path that changes the industry, that the industry needs to change. We need to drop the growth paradigm. We need to stop trusting in technologies. We need to do many different kind of actions in order to make sure nothing like this happens again, and also develop the industry in a more sustainable way. But before we go through some of these topics that other academics have been looking for, we also have to consider the impacts of the coronavirus in the long run and in the short run. In the short run, we are now witnessing what is happening. We are seeing that the impact is huge. It's the biggest thing to happen to tourism ever. But then in the long run, we can also look at megatrends. And think how these megatrends will change the tourism industry. If something is going to happen in the future, it's always great to look at the megatrends. So these are trends that are relatively stable over time, that are not changed by events such as coronavirus. For example, evolving visitor demand. So previously, visitor demand in tourism has come from Germany, has come from the United States, but we are moving towards Asia more and more. Chinese tourists are becoming, or have already become, the biggest spending market globally, and it's only growing. We are also getting a lot more. The global population is growing, and we know how it's growing in which markets, and all of these are affecting where does the tourism demand come from and what it is like. So in Europe, for example, we are in Sweden, we used to talk about flight shame and how we shouldn't be flying anymore, and how we in Europe are paying a lot more attention to these sustainability issues and so on. But if we look at the middle class in Asia, it's almost sure that the demand there will grow similarly as it used to grow in Europe, and it will require a lot more flying, a lot more mass tourism destinations, and all of the other issues that we have witnessed from destinations from Europe. So we can look at different countries and see the trajectories of tourism demand quite well. Of course, the sustainable tourism growth cannot be neglected. There is very little way we can see a future where sustainability would be less valued than what it is now. So most likely the trend will continue. It's a megatrend, and it has to be a megatrend. We only have a limited number of years. No one knows how many to really prevent the worst from happening regarding climate change, and also not to mention all the inequalities and lack of justice that is in our current economic system. And sustainable tourism should be able to address these issues. Then, of course, we have a lot of technological development happening that we will be talking about later on. But the big mega trends of information and communication technologies is that there's new attributes, new features for technology. Technology is getting cheaper, it's getting smaller, it's getting more efficient, it's getting more powerful. These are mega trends that are guiding the development of technology also in the future. And then, of course, travel mobility. How people travel, what is the transportation system? And for example, the growth of flying globally was projected to be quite huge until 2050, and it still is. So I find it quite difficult to see a future where the number of flights globally flown would stay in the state where, in the numbers where they are today at the peak of COVID-19 crisis. That is actually something that would be required if we want to cut the CO2 emissions from the tourism industry. One of the biggest ways to cut those would be to limit the number of flights globally that can be flown. But without any international intervention, regulations regarding that, I find it really difficult to see that happening in the future. So something has definitely happened. There's no denying that the coronavirus already had an impact. So not just that we have millions of people unemployed in the tourism industry, which is a big factor in itself, but also something else. So we are seeing destinations and businesses investing a lot more in e-commerce. People now don't want to visit travel agencies anymore. They want to buy their services, tourism services also from online. We are seeing a fast adoption of robotics, robot concierge, receptionists, even chefs, waitresses, cleaning robots. All of these are coming into the tourism industry because of the COVID-19 crisis. It's definitely been one of the biggest drivers of digital transformation in the tourism industry ever. We have also new pricing models. We are seeing that tourists are looking for cheaper possibilities at this moment, which is then, of course, difficult equation, because companies have a pressure of when there's not that many tourists to really get more money out of the few tourists that come in. So and for example, tourists are looking for more elastic services, so services that they can cancel or change in a moment's notice in a short time, and all of these are affecting the industry quite a lot. Sharing economy is definitely one of the things that has been impacted by the coronavirus, but we are also seeing, for example, Airbnb, where you can share your accommodation with guests. That in many places the Airbnb and other forms of sharing accommodation or peer-to-peer accommodation actually have bounced back faster than hotels. We also have tracking technologies. For example, in Finland, we have this Koronavilkku application, which enables us to know whether or not we've been within the vicinity of someone who has made a positive coronavirus test. And it's the same, for example, in China, that in order to travel to China, you have to download an app where they can follow you and make sure that what is happening with you. And then, of course, virtual reality. We are also seeing a fast intake of virtual reality and digital tourism services, guided tours, and all of these. And I think for the sustainable development of the future of tourism, these virtual reality experiences are actually excellent supplement to the existing tourism services. There's many sustainable sides in these virtual services. For example, that people don't have to travel. They can learn things the same way if they would have traveled. They can meet different cultures. There's very little waste coming from virtual reality experiences. And so on. So I'm really hoping that virtual reality will become and virtual experiences one of the sustainable tourism services for the future of tourism. Of course, the question is that will they actually substitute anything? Will people actually travel less because of virtual reality experiences? I'm quite doubtful of that, but it remains to be seen. Okay, if we talk about bounce back and how tourism will recover, China can be used as a quite good example of what happens when we are done with the pandemic, when it's safe to travel again. And we are seeing that tourism recovers quite fast. It bounces back as fast as possible. People are still willing and able to travel as long as it's safe. And I think that all the examples from the world show us that tourism industry is just waiting to bounce back. People are waiting to be able to travel again, and that is unlikely to change in the short run, within the 1 year framework that we are talking about with the vaccine. But if the longer all of this takes, the worse the situation becomes. One of the good indications, if we think of what happens in the future, is of course to follow the money. There's been already such a huge investment in the tourism industry, in cruise ships, in hotels, in airlines, in airports. All of these investments need to be paid back. The investors want return on investment for their money. And I find it unlikely that we will be getting any new big investments in the tourism industry before the old investments are again fully utilized. And for this purpose, and because of this, I'm seeing that the tourism will bounce back, and we are not just gonna throw away that many ships or airplanes or shut down hotels just to like limit the number of tourists and make tourism a smaller industry. So I think those are the first ones where the infrastructure already exists, and that's where the tourists will most likely also go. But then in the long run, and all the new investments that we are making in the tourism industry, it would be so important for them to have this sustainability perspective within the investment framework, and being able to assess the impacts of every investment from not just from economic, but also from social, cultural, and environmental sides would be important. And whoever is investing in the tourism industry, it's about making these investments in a sustainable way. If we don't make sustainable investments, if the money doesn't direct towards sustainable investments, it's very difficult for the whole industry to become any more sustainable at all. And again, what is the reason why investors make these investments in the tourism industry? It's of course that what the consumers want. I firmly believe that our choices as consumers matter. We have to be the change that we want to see. If the consumers don't care about reducing the CO2 emissions of flying, if they think that flying is much more beneficial for them personally than what it harms the environment, they will continue flying. It's up to us to make these decisions, because in the end, the industry and the investments will follow the trends of what the consumers want. And for example, we did a research with one of our master students, and to understand why people make sustainable choices. And we noticed that social circles are the best indicator of why people make sustainable tourism choices, because in the more appraised, the more valued sustainable choices are within their own networks, among their friends, their relatives, and social networks, the more likely it is that they are going to make those choices. So whenever we are seeing people making sustainable choices, traveling by train, traveling by or just doing these local trips, visiting tourism businesses in their own cities and in their own destinations, if we can just praise their efforts and appreciate their choices, then it's a great way to change the behavior of people towards more sustainable choices, that we have to appraise them, we have to value them also in our social networks. But that is unlikely to be enough. So earlier I mentioned this regenerative tourism. So it's a form of tourism that doesn't exploit, that doesn't destroy. It's a form of tourism that regenerates nature, regenerates communities instead of destroying them. And now the tourism academics, just such as Jenny Cave and Diane Dredge, are looking at ways how that can happen. So now the scientists have figured out what needs to happen. Now we are figuring out how does that happen, and it needs diverse economic practices. So nowadays, the growth paradigm, one of the big things about the growth paradigm is that only things that can be measured in dollars or euros or yuans can be valuable. Now we have to find out new ways to define what is valuable for us. how we value communities, happiness, social connections between people. All of these now matter, and we have to diversify our economic practices in order to achieve that. And this paper, for example, is one of the first ones and one of the latest ones to really go into this topic and start thinking that and just looking at the best practices that are in the field that would help us to go into this direction. There is already great diverse economic practices happening in the tourism field that could be multiplied in different contexts, and that would be a great step towards more sustainable regenerative tourism. One of the big questions is, of course, that what happens to the supply if the crisis prolongs. So the longer the crisis takes, the longer it takes for the tourism to recover again, the more assets we will lose. For example, in Finland, if we are going to lose all those 10,000 dog sled dogs, it won't be overnight that we can recover them. It will take years and years if it's even something that we want to recover. So it's again a good time for us to discuss if what should come back and what shouldn't. We have a lot of bad practices in the field, and this could be kind of like a restart, and many have thought that this has to be a restart. We cannot go back to the old ones, but we are still finding out that what needs to be done in order to prevent us from not going back to the old ones and having the same problems again and again. For example, with those dog sleds, these dogs or dog sledding is not even authentic Finnish experience. It's not something that was done in Finland to great extent before the tourism industry adopted it, and now it has become one of the cornerstones of the tourism experience in Lapland. So now it's people are starting to question whether that is a good cornerstone, whether that is authentic, whether that is what kind of Lapland we want to show to the world. In order for tourism to have this sustainable recovery, I think one of the best things is that consumers have to be able to make sustainable choices. We have to be, the tourism industry has to be able to direct people in a way that they can be sure that their choices are sustainable. One of the ways to do that is, for example, various kind of sustainability certifications. One of the problems with them is, of course, that no one knows these, and there's quite a lot of them, and no one knows what they mean, even if they are familiar with environmental certification schemes. So I think with digital technologies and especially how we buy our tourism services, it shouldn't be just that we make the choice based on price, but we have to be also be able to assess the sustainability of the choices that we make. And at this moment, there is no good way to do that. We don't know how sustainable the choices we make are. And even though more and more people care about these issues, the market for sustainable tourism products and services is growing all the time. We just don't have a good way to help people to make these sustainable choices. If we would have a good way, if it would be easy for tourists to make sustainable choices, and that would enable businesses that have sustainable practices, that are having sustainable tourism experiences, that would give them competitive advantage. That would give them extra profits. That would give them extra customers. And that is the methodology and the line of thinking that everybody in the industry understands. That if the consumers make choices based on these sustainability aspects. I have to have these. I have to be sustainable if they affect the consumer choices. If the price is the only thing that affects the choices or prices and reviews, then these issues are out of the game. The businesses don't have that big motivation to focus on them. So it has to be through the competitive landscape of tomorrow, at least in my perspective. So to conclude this presentation, we go back to the goals of this presentation and the whole YUFE network, that to examine the identity and responsibilities in the global world. That what does this mean for Europe? What does this mean for the tourism in Europe and the tourism industry in Europe? And you can just imagine Europe with its borders closed. And well, now it's not even about imagination when something like this is happening. For example, Finland has taken like dire measures to close its borders, and we have probably one of the biggest travel limitations among all the European countries. There's virtually no one who can come to Finland at this moment. And what this means and what this makes for the European community is a bit frightening, because the European community has always, in my mind, been a community, so countries together, and that's the central idea of Europe, that when we are working together, when we have the same goals, when we are trying to reach the same things, there's no competition. And this collaboration versus competition is one of the things that we have learned in the tourism industry. There's very little that an individual business in tourism can do, especially in international markets, but you need collaboration. You need a destination that is attractive, that has a collection of businesses that can be seen as competitors to each other, but actually they are complementing each other from the international tourism perspective. And this is kind of collaboration that we also need in Europe. Of course, if we look at China, for example, what they did great, and you can always argue if are the numbers from China real and so on, but the numbers I've seen so far, for example, from STR, show that the tourism, especially domestic tourism, has recovered there quite well. And one of the things that shows that maybe Europe is not as coherent as possible was that if Europe would have shut down in the similar way as China did, and just get rid of the disease all at once in all the different parts of the Europe at the same time, we would probably be domestically in a very similar situation where China is, where there's very few new cases coming abroad. So maybe that is something that we can learn from for the future, that working together in these issues is paramount. We of course have obligation for green transition, and we also have the means, the best means and the resources to do that. Europe has used, if we look at the historical use of carbon budget, we have used our fair share of it. We have, in my opinion, a reason and resources to lead this transition into green economy. We have plenty of new ways to do that, but it requires new thinking. It requires new economic practices. It doesn't happen just by this scientific technology paradigm where we wait for technology to come to save us. But it shouldn't neither mean that we stop traveling, that we stop enjoying life, that we stop buying things that we like. I really dislike this discourse that in order for us to transition into sustainable world, we have to cut down everything and be miserable. it's not that. We Finns are the happiest country, happiest people on the planet 3 times in a row, according to one survey, one study, and everybody has been looking into why is that, and what is the role of happiness, and where does happiness come from. And you don't actually need that much money for happiness. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a great indicator of what people really need, and it's about belongingness and finding your right people and being happy together in communities. And tourism is a fantastic possibility for us to find our communities, interact with them, and enjoy being together. Of course, Europe has also great possibilities. For example, increasing sustainable transportation methods, such as overnight trains, which are now gaining traction all over Europe, and that's just a fantastic thing to have. We have way too much flying domestically, well, within the European region, and we have to find ways to reduce it. But so to conclude, there are many possibilities for sustainable recovery of the tourism industry, but at this moment it looks like that we are on a path to go back to what tourism was before the COVID-19 hit us. No one knows when and how the recovery will happen, but it looks like that the tourism industry will be one of the first industries to start recovering fast, if there is still enough supply to be around, if we have the methods to do that. If not, then we have to find a way and new ways to start thinking about the future of tourism and the role of tourism in the world of tomorrow, but we have plenty of ways to do that, so no worries. Great, so that was my presentation, and now I would be happy to discuss these topics with you. Let me just stop